not going to be a full presentation on the strategies of Davenport because we don't have one. So this is going to be more of an attendee-led discussion on what your guys' strategies, best practices, how you guys store lessons learned, how you guys find them, things like that. So the overview, we're going to go over the purpose of lessons learned. I'm sure we have a lot of PMP certified individuals in here, so you guys probably already know. I did bring the PMBOK just in case anyone wants to challenge me.
Which version?
The 6th, yeah. So then we're going to go over my history a little bit because the reason I'm doing this, it kind of revolves around that. And we're going to look at an evaluation. So I've been going around to different businesses, such as yourself, and studying how they store, manage, and retrieve their lessons learned. And a lot of them, I'll just go with the results are pretty interesting, but we'll go over those as well. Then we'll kind of take a few minutes to fill out the survey, and then after the survey, I'm going to ask you guys to actually voice what you put on the survey. So like a summary of just your best practices. So the purpose of lessons learned. So this is the knowledge gained during a project, which shows how project events were addressed or should be addressed in the future for the purpose of improving future performance. So everybody, I'm sure they've seen those arrows many times. So identifying those lessons learned for future use. Documentation, easy. Usually you send out some sort of survey. The analyze, store, and retrieve is kind of what we're going over today. I found that a lot of people, they can document them very well. However, they stick them in a shared folder, and then you never look at them again, which that's currently Davenport's. So these are the three main that I guess kind of came up on my own, what lessons learned, their purpose are. So process improvement, business development, and shared knowledge. Basically just to improve performance in a way. So a bit of my history. First off, I am from Ohio. I didn't mention that in the beginning, so I wouldn't get kicked out. But I did move to Michigan. So I was in the United States Marine Corps for about 4 years. And during that time, I have held various billets that dealt with project management, but I didn't know at the time that this was an actual industry. So you can imagine my excitement coming out. I was also trained in yellow belt through green, well, in the Marine Corps through Lean Six Sigma. And then after the Marine Corps, I actually moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan for Davenport University's Project Management program. So while I was in the program, I was accepted as an intern in the Davenport University Project Management office. And then they actually hired me on as a student worker, so that's what I am now. I'm kind of a, better to explain it as like a part-time position. So they allow students to work in their offices and departments. And then I actually just received my black belt certification in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So if I'm going to ask you guys to share your best practices, and some of you may not have them, I have to kind of throw myself under the bus. Because the United States Marine Corps, we're not mature with our PMO standards, anything like that. I've never met a certified PMP in the Marine Corps, and I've studied this for a while on PFC to, I believe I got all the way up to Lieutenant Colonel, and nobody's heard of lessons learned. They don't know what that is. So right now, our collection was during daily operation. So you'd write down a little notebook, what you learned from that day. The storage, we'd either have a shared drive or it would be in a notebook. And we'd carry that around until we either lost it or, you know, until somebody asked us. But there was only one person that knew where that location was. So it was never really optimal. Retrieval, I put NA because nobody's gonna know who to ask or know where to find it. So the Marine Corps is shaping this. I heard they're actually looking into creating an MOS for project management because they just implemented information security. So hopefully that will be seen in the future. Davenport University. So our collection is through a Google form. It's a kind of a survey. And then our storage is in the Lessons Learned archive folder in our team drive. However, when you look at it, it's not very efficient because you have to find it, and then you have to figure out what project it was in, you can't remember the exact project name, then it's a little more challenging. But then, once you open that document, the survey, I don't know if anyone's ever used a Google form into a spreadsheet, it kind of mixes everything up. So it's kind of like putting a PowerPoint into Google, because then everything's all in different places and things like that. So it's very challenging to read. But during my internship, which was, I believe, September to December of last year, Kevin, our project management director, came up to me and was like, hey, I want this internship to be you implementing a lessons learned repository. I hope you know how to code HTML. Okay, we can do that. But then we discussed it further, and there was just no, I guess, there's no best practices on how to do it or where to put it. In the Marine Corps, I saw some people using databases such as Microsoft Access, things like that, for certain lessons learned, but it wasn't anything like what we see today. So then when I was hired on as the assistant project manager, as a student worker position, we kind of discussed it further. And I actually made this one of my goals, because it made me look at it as we have so many PMPs, so many industries in Grand Rapids, but nobody has yet to give me a good solution on how to store lessons learned. And we'll kind of go over what industries I've already interviewed later. I'm not going to mention names or the actual industry names because I don't want to, throw them under the bus either. So completely autonomous. So I've interviewed 10 distinct industries so far. So this is all levels of leadership. So this is associates, a lot of associates, a lot of mid-level. I actually interviewed one CEO, and then, like I said, that lieutenant. So we have chemical, construction, education, finance, food, government, healthcare, infosec, insurance, and manufacturing. And then, based on what they said, I didn't have the survey filled out. I actually didn't construct it until this meeting. So this was just kind of me asking them questions and seeing what they said. So based on what they said, I could stick them into these 4 main categories of having no repository, never heard of lessons learned, stored in a shared folder, or personally stored. Those are the only responses I got. So if somebody could give me a different one today, that would be fantastic. So as you can see from this, it's a little more challenging to understand. But just based on the color difference between no repository and personally stored versus stored, you can just tell that it's going to be bad. 40% had no repository. 13% never heard of lessons learned, so this was including government, a lot of infosec, I think finance, food. 20% stored in shared folder, and I'm actually going to point out one person today, which was Jeff, who I actually got to interview. So he does the same as Davenport. I found a lot of higher education, they do use Google, so we do use that same where we stick a lessons learned in a shared folder, and then if, say, somebody comes in, they can look at it through that, but if you don't know it's there, then it's very challenging to find that. Especially coming from a student worker position, I came from the Marine Corps where we had nothing like this. So then coming in and learning about all these people within Davenport University that can, they don't like to use email, they like to use IM, or certain instances like that. So having a standardized lessons learned repository would be optimal for everyone, especially, so you can kind of implement this into your training right when you go in. And then 27% were personally stored. So that means either I got a lot of points to the head, like where do you store your lessons learned, and they just point to their head. So it's like, okay, I'll just put that as personal. Or that notebook that you could either throw away or rip a page out, somebody could find, things like that, which I've noticed that a lot of lessons learned we don't want other people to see because that's specific to that project, or some of them shouldn't be seen. But all right, so now I want to kind of go into the survey. So if you guys could take 5-10 minutes, fill it out if you haven't already, and then we can kind of go over either person by person, of what your instances are. And if you don't feel comfortable with sharing, that's completely fine. I know a lot of people that did share with me, they looked at me and were like, please don't tell my leadership I'm telling you this. So, completely fine. And basically what we're going to go over is just that huge section on the back of how does your company store, manage, and retrieve lessons learned. So if there's no current process, do you have a strategy in mind? And I'm not sure if we have any developers in here or people that have implemented any lessons learned software. But the only two that I could find, I don't know if anyone's ever Googled lessons learned repository online. There's nothing. No?
There's nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, I found Sector Solutions and Lessons Flow, which are both pretty sketchy. They have 0 reviews or like 1 or 2 that aren't really giving any type of detail on what they do. So there's just nothing out there, and it's crazy because it's, yeah. So we have about 15 times that lessons learned repository, lessons learned register, or lessons learned are mentioned in PMBOK, but there's nothing on how to actually store these or how to standardize it. There's the questions to give, but there's nothing regarding how to do it. And Google's not much of help either, so. So basically just trying to get everyone to voice how they store, manage, retrieve lessons learned, whether that be in a closing folder, a shared folder, or some sort of database. I know we have a manufacturing company that use Microsoft Access as well for this.
Yeah, we just use network drive, so each of the individual projects complete the process of gathering lessons learned, gets stored into a network drive under the project. There's no method for searchability, there's no method for reuse. It's kind of a check box, it's done. There is personal learning from it because you go through it, but not a lot of organizational learning.
Okay. You at the same company?
Yep. So current state, we have, a form filled out, it stays in a project file on a shared drive. So accessibility is really non-existent. It kind of collects the dust, if you will, digitally. We've built a database system that has searchability function, but are now at a stage where we have to get the adoption for it, and that's a bigger hurdle than I think was anticipated. So one is the contribution of it, and then 2, the searchability and who's going to read it, really.
Okay.
Oh, Spectrum Health here, or Priority Health, and to be honest with you, lessons learned is an afterthought that never gets done. So that's the first problem. The second problem, if it does get done, we have this thing called clarity.
Okay.
Which is, so if anybody stores it, they store it in there, but just like you said, there's absolutely no way to find stuff other than what I would call tribal knowledge. So I asked my neighbor tells me.
Okay. Yeah, Davenport uses Basecamp, so it's, from my understanding, typically the same outlook as Clarity. It's just if we store lessons learned in there, it's even harder to find. So.
Kind of new in my new role, so I'll use my previous role as a reference. And we used a project workbook that was based out of Excel, and there'd be a tab for lessons learned that had to be checked that we completed at the end to close the project. But I think those workbooks then just get archived in SharePoint and never looked at.
So that workbook was specific to the project?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm retired and from GE Aviation, and I think we spent a fair amount of time, this goes back a ways, so, but I think it's, judging from what I'm hearing, very similar. What we learned after spending a fair amount of time and effort in investing in trying to gather lessons learned, and it didn't take too long, was that to do it right involves a whole, how would you say, either you have to have a big infrastructure to gather and to get the information and so on, or you have to leverage what people are already doing on the internet and getting things that way. So, so you have to decide what the investments were. So one of the things that we did to try to make things practically get the lessons learned into our processes was to do periodic, depending on how long the project ran and so on, periodic project reviews where we would actually have a vetting of what the lesson was that perhaps was a good thing to integrate or not, because you need to know whether, you don't want to just put lessons in just because somebody's idea, is somebody's idea. So you have to do some vetting, but then we would change the processes as the project unfolds. So we didn't want to wait until the end of the project to do lessons learned, although we would do it at the end of the project, but we would want to change the processes along the way and have a faster learning cycle basically on the project. And then if that project was similar to other projects, that's where the tribal knowledge might come in a little bit more, where we would try to share that across a particular discipline, like flight data recorders would have a number of different projects that we might share that information. But it depended a lot on subject matter experts and having them spread adequately across different projects. So that was still kind of tribal, but I think the big thing was to try to integrate the lessons learned in an informal way, almost more informally. Rather than build a whole repository and build a big infrastructure, we just found that to be a big overhead that was not really helpful.
Okay. So when you say those, I guess, experts, if you will, would there be a few of them that were in charge of kind of combining these projects into certain
not formally,
sections?
Yeah, not formally, but they maybe during a review of during one of these reviews that we would do periodically along the project, we might ask one of them to facilitate that, or to lead that, or to help guide that, and then of course there would have to be some kind of decision making as to whether or not that was really going to get put into the processes that we did then. So it was I would not say it was really structured really heavily, but we found that the more structure there was, it didn't really add any value because people were not using it anyway, and so it didn't seem to be worth the effort.
Yeah. The way I see it, you are reviewing it more than I would in a repository, so that might be the actual solution, just doing these reviews every so often and having somebody that would kind of collect these and stick them in a pot almost, and if this project's similar to this one, then we can review all of them together. Aubrey?
So, I don't know what I'm doing my current role too, so I'm gonna glean from previous. As a matter of fact, when I was in the process of leaving, we were putting together a lessons learned, a new process for lessons learned. So what we were doing before that was we would capture it, that would be the last, similar to you saying, check off of a project we had to do. A lessons learned, we did it with the whole team, a meeting, and we had the same questions and used the same form, everyone would document it. It would get saved in the project folder, and then no one would ever touch it again. So the project managers all met together about every other week. So when we started doing those meetings, towards the end, we said, well, we should be reviewing lessons learned together. So I know that they were developing a process of categorizing lessons learned and putting them all into a spreadsheet and then reviewing them in those project manager meetings every other week.
Okay.
And so some of the stuff would be like quick hit stuff or just kind of maybe, maybe some emotional intelligence wins or like those
Okay.
types of things. And then some things would be process changes, and then some things would be maybe organizational changes that needed to be elevated up. So that was kind of how they were dividing things. So if we kept seeing like a recurrent issue, we would take it up. Now, I only got to witness like maybe 2 of those meetings before I left, but that was kind of it was still in the very baby infantile stages
Okay.
a few months ago, so.
Yeah, I didn't mention before, but if you aren't a project manager or aren't in the role of project management at all, feel free to share either your department's lessons learned. I'm sure everyone writes down at least something that they can use for future use, but, or personal. I mean, we all have our personal lessons learned and how we keep track of those. They might just be a point to the head, but, you know. Okay. Back to you.
So we work at the same company. Project management at Burn is only like 3 years old, so it's still very new. We utilize Smartsheets for our project tracking, all of our action item lists, timelines, everything is based on a Smartsheet. So I imagine that's where we would store a lessons learned repository if we had one. We're very driven on insights of subject matter experts and kind of their longevity of the company and in the industry and what they remember. So we literally have a folder in our shared drive called Bob's Brain. After this gentleman left, we tried to glean everything that we could, and now this stuff kind of gets stored in Bob's brain. I wish I was making it up. So it's one of those things where, if the subject matter expert doesn't know, then it's pretty widely accepted that we're kind of pioneering change and forging some new ground or whatever, so. And then we just really value transparency. So by the end of the program, everybody on our leadership team, from CEO to senior manager, would be aware of the things that we had to overcome and work through. And the hope is that someone would remember and make us bring it up when we come back. I would also say that searchability is something that we struggle with when we talk about lessons learned. Is how do you remember? I mean, having a tab in a program file or a shared drive with the project files. I mean, we have a shared drive with the project file as well for everything, but just even trying to remember what program that was in and what it exactly dealt with and those things. I think that's my biggest thought when it comes to creating a repository is how do I create something that's searchable that has so many different tags on the line or whatever that I can just type in, blue or, plastic injection or something, and it would bring me to that category. I don't know. So that's where we struggle.
Okay.
We need Google for that.
But that's the
Google
thing.
lessons.
And we have a wiki. You can type more on that. We have an internal wiki where we could, again, kind of search those things, but it's just who's maintaining this software, this program for search engine optimization in our internal search.
Just to tag on to Matt here, one of my particular roles in insights or the research and development, and one of our tasks in this last year moving forward is capture the knowledge. Is a huge thing for us, and it's been interesting because there's knowledge from everything from prototyping. What do we do with all this stuff that we create every day and the lessons learned around it? And so, as he said, we're in our infancy, and I think as we develop more through trainings like this, it's like I'm learning from you guys what's important to actually capture, because whether it's customer related and keeping that out of silos. There's a lot of information even across our company that's siloed, and I find that a lot as I build projects is, okay, who knows what about the history of this? And especially as we have to review everything quarterly at a governance, it's always going back and capturing that knowledge, capturing that history, what's changed in the last 3 months. And it gets stressful because in fast-moving companies, change happens all the time. And for it to not be communicated across
to all the teams and to realize that, you know, ABC company has had the same mistake happen to them 7 times. Why are we not, in our project, why are we not fixing that? And so that's where that tagging comes in. Let's, you know, look at ABC company and find out what have we learned working with them over the last 10 years and over these projects, because that could help build that relationship a lot, as well as inform in a transitional, a new project manager or a new person coming in, they can look back at the history of that whole program and say, whoa, we've got, you know, we know that this is what's important to that customer.
So that history would be documented?
Through just the projects, as the lessons learned come through, they realize the same problems, you know, same lessons learned keep happening. And if nobody reviews it, then it's really, as we learned anything, it's more of a, no, we're just reacting to the same problem over and over again instead of creating a solution.
Okay.
That's where the value of lessons learned really comes in, is looking at it from a holistic approach. Are we making the same mistakes? Or are we learning the same thing over and over again, which means we didn't learn it.
I'm having a light bulb moment right here. Where
Bob's brain.
Smoke.
Bob's brain. So, does anybody else use Smartsheets? No? Okay, so we have a weekly report out meeting for all of our programs to our leadership teams about status and roadblocks and things like that. One of the cool things about Smartsheets is it doesn't ever delete cell history. So Smartsheets is like a giant Excel, but it's better. So it never deletes cell history. So I'm thinking in this moment that if we could think of the program, there is a way that I could go through the 15 months of cell history and then find the lessons learned, you know. So I think in a way that is a log, but anyway, we're just not really
Just finding those keywords.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what I'm hearing here, but also from my experience, is that lessons learned do us no good if we don't bake it into your projects, in your culture. And I think part of the problem is the nature of lessons learned is what's the lessons learned for this project? And you pull out this particular thing this close to it, and you know this, and you put it away somewhere. I keep all my project records, all my project close records, I have my lessons learned sticking in there, and I know it, right here. And it's, I started thinking as we're talking is, in order to have a system that works, you have to be able to categorize the knowledge. Because I work on a lot of system implementation projects, ERP projects, and if I had the general repository, so I have to categorize. Here's some things, let's say I had 20 different lessons learned from an ERP upgrade. And one in particular I can tell you was how we did testing. Because in the past, testing was, oh, you guys just go on and test the way you want. That's how it's been done over the years. And then you give them, you know, it's got to be done by October 15th, and on the evening of October 14th at 11:59, there's still people trying to get it all in because they didn't do it. And I've seen that. And the lesson I learned, because I did it like 5 years ago, we did it that way. And I'm going, all right, this is just getting tiring. So we changed it this last big upgrade we did. And I did it more from an agile approach. We're going to have 4 meetings that are going to lead up to the date where we have to have everything signed off. You can sign off in part on some things that you've done or in whole, and I come to them and I do a stand-up, and I basically, it's either public recognition or public shaming, depending on how you look at it. It's like, okay, what have you gotten done? What are you still working on? What do you got planned? Can you sign off on anything? Good, send an email, do it. We had a Google form, actually a Google sheet that had any issues, and then they could put the issues in, we see the issues, we fix the issues, and we come back to them. We did it that way, testing went really well, everybody liked it. The lesson learned, do it like that, don't do it like the other way. So how would I categorize that? So if I threw it into my little pile, into this particular folder for this particular project, you're never going to see it again. Only I know it, and the people who experienced it know it. The repository, in my mind, has to be, when it comes to testing systems or in general, this is what you do. And that's just like, but to keep it brief, because a lesson learned that's this long won't get read, okay? But it has to be a very simple, a good lesson usually can put it in probably 100 words or less, probably 50 words or less. What's the lesson that you learn? Because it comes down to principles. It comes down to, you know, how you do things. And there might be some specific things, but that's where I think the big problem is. We're looking at all these things, this like scattered landscape, all these things you learn, but that's why it works better up here, because you process things better by what we learned. but be able to put that into a book of sorts of how this works, and then to be able to review it, and to be able to understand it. And Bob's brain in particular, you know, how did he document this stuff? Or is it just like a bunch of random notes that look like sticky notes in a room with sticky notes, you know? At least, can we color, you know, coordinate, you know? So, but that to me, I know is the challenge, and it's probably why there isn't a lot out there on this, because it's usually addressed by the specific lessons for the specific project, and not be able to take this knowledge and apply it to future projects. That's what it's supposed to be.
Which is great if you're still the project manager on that.
Right.
Like say it's an upgrade project, so
Yeah.
you know everything. And that's what
And
we're
the
running
lessons learned
here.
become, but it becomes diversified based on, okay, is this a lesson that I learned, like what I just said, would that work at your organization? No, it probably wouldn't, because I based my lesson around the culture of the people I deal with. They're last minute, I will, you know, get it done, and it'll be hastily done in some cases, but there's some people who are very thorough, but they don't feel like they're gonna get enough done because the time just crept up on them. But when I put things in place and say, every 2 weeks we're gonna sit down and meet, it pushes them. So the last minute stuff is done in that 2-week period, as opposed to over a period of 6 to 8 weeks of being done, and it gets done hastily. So 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, it all got done. All got signed off, very few issues, and any issues we had were real minor going into it, but it was put into small batches. That to me is something I've learned that applies to multiple things, not just doing testing. So again, that's a principle, it's something I learned, but how I apply it depends on the people, depends on the project, depends on the culture, depends on the nature of the work, if it's a system, if it's a, you know, something we're building, something we're implementing, you know, there's a number of things. It's very complex, at least in the IT world. And I'm sure if you're dealing with, you guys do electrical systems, manufacturing, or how you apply to construction, how you apply to events. I mean, I do event stuff a lot with WMPMI. I can give you a long list of lessons I've learned, okay? But how would I categorize it? That's the thing, it's about categorizing and be able to categorize it well makes it searchable. And that's what the thing is, it's the retrieval part you mentioned. Because again, I can retrieve stuff in my brain all day long until I go mad. And then eventually, that hard drive gets wiped. But that to me is the key. It's how to categorize it, how to retrieve it. It doesn't make sense, especially the people that are going to be accessing maybe 10 years from now, 20 years, 50 years from now. And will those lessons still apply?
Right.
And updating it. You know, if I'm still chiseling stuff out on granite tablets and I'm in the computer age, you know, I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's what we're running into, because coming from my perspective of coming into the project management office, I relied heavily on my mentor as an intern, and then she kind of transitioned over, and now I'm running 2 projects by myself. So they're still there, they're still around, but it is very limited where you walk in, the PMO, and everybody's there, because everybody's in meetings, they have these team members coming in and out constantly, they're on the phone with vendors, things like that. So with those experts in there, I have them, yes, but they're not always available. So it would just be helpful to have something where you can kind of look into. And I probably should have asked this earlier, but do you document your lessons learned, or the whole team?
I document the team, I document my own. Typically when I'm doing projects, especially, a lot of what I do, I'll do a retrospective after each product review. So let's every 2 weeks, you know, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you do differently next time? And I found that some teams don't want me writing it down while I'm doing it, so I listen to what they say, I quickly go write it down. Some of it's pretty self-explanatory and I've already got it written somewhere, but it's the big stuff is what I tend to write down, not the little stuff. And some things are coming out, some things are taught by way of the pin box, some things are just taught through smashing your head into that wall over and over again, that everyone else has smashed their head in over and over again, I don't need to say it. But then there's things that are specific to the project itself, or that type of project. So there's so many different levels and grades of information. That's what I'm saying, there's the way we do it, I think it's backwards. There should be general and more specific as you get down. We tend to go specific and try to work it up to general, and it never makes it. At least as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make it unless you take it with your brain and you go on to the next project with it.
Back table.
I was just going to second what Jeff said. We don't have the repository for our lessons learned. We did start a project to go ahead and take care of this approximately 2 years ago. And we do retrospectives, like Jeff said. I'm from DSA International, so we're in product development. We work with furniture. And we run several different types of projects. And so, yes, we got stuck, or at least that's where the project led us to, was that we needed to get that common language so that we could start this. And we work at Clarizen, and I don't know if anybody knows Clarizen. That's our project management software. And so I did create a view for lessons learned, and we did break it down by type of project and by type of lessons learned. Was it a process? Was it this or that? And then as part of our project close process, we were starting to make sure that everybody had that retrospective, but we did it as a team, because what I would perceive as a lesson learned might be differently perceived as one of my team members. So very, very elementary wise, I gave everybody Post-it notes, and they got 2 blue or 2 green. And I'd be like, well, what worked well, what worked bad, and then I'd group them up on a board, and we'd all discuss it. And then the lessons learned popped up a little bit more. And cross-functionally, over different projects, you would see different ones pop up. Where the project for the repository fell off is that it wasn't carried all the way through, and we were hung up on getting that common language because we wanted to be able to search it. When we came up to, this is a product improvement type project that we're doing, and the same players and this and that, and so it would be searchable, like Jeff was saying. Whereas if it's new product development, I'm working with a cross-functional and cross-Atlantic team, what worked well in that instance. And so that it could be searchable across the different project managers that were running the projects without sitting right next to them and be like, oh, did you experience this? What'd you do? Or the Bob's brain, maybe, right? But it's just getting that common language, and everybody's busy, like you said, the PMO office, whatever you walk in, they're there, but they're not, because they're busy, and it's establishing that common language and then making it the culture. So everybody understands that language, and everybody understands how to search it. You know, if you're asking your team for your lessons learned, Joe might say, yeah, that really sucked doing it this way, but then you need to bring it back to maybe the PMO office or whatever to be able to categorize it into what that would show up as for that particular lesson if it was going to be trackable. And that's where we fell off. I realize there's value to it. That's one reason why we came today, because we saw value to lessons learned, just because I don't want to hit my head against the wall.
It's a rough topic.
Yeah. It's that application of knowledge. Because let's say you have all those things in place, you gather the knowledge, you categorize it well, you can treat it well, then are you actually using it?
Yeah,
And
and that's why I like, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I like that you said you would meet quarterly and kind of review. And that's really good, because when we thought we would be looking at it would be at the very beginning of the project. Okay, these were these 5, 10, whatever, 20 projects that were like what we're trying to accomplish in this scope, right? And so this is what we experienced, and what could we learn from these lessons learned, right? But we never were able to take it that far. So that was the hope when we were trying to categorize it.
Okay. So from that, I'm getting kind of having a like project manager meeting almost in that data gathering phase before a project, and then just kind of review. Because then you have everybody sitting in a room, and then you can just kind of spitball, hey, do you remember any projects that would relate to this? And then you can go down the project team. I'm not sure how many of you have your entire project team within the building or globally. So ours mostly deal with either vendors that are located at different places or take them on site. But most of our team is just those departments within Davenport University. So we constantly reuse a lot of people.
I'm with her.
Okay.
Exactly what she said. And actually, I'm going to let Britt speak to our company.
Okay, so my name is Britt. I work for Obama Corporation. We do interior finishing for commercial construction. I've only been there for about 6 months, and I've only had my PMP certification for about a year. So when I came in there, the COO was talking about, he was
complaining about the fact that we had these lessons learned, but they weren't being distributed around the company, so I made it my goal to have that. Because we don't have anything right now. All the lessons learned, we have lessons learned, but they're in each individual project manager's project folder in the shared drive. I've been trying to find a good way to put a repository together because it needs to be accessible to not only the office people, but all of our field employees, like the job leaders that are running each individual job need to be able to access it. And they need to be able to utilize it like with the software, because not all of them are the most tech savvy. So that's the problem we're running into right now, and I'm working with IT to try and find something that they can access mobilely, that they can search, and that they know how to use, okay? Because some of them even have a hard time. So what we're in the process of doing is every project meeting, it's a closeout meeting, you have to have that to finish if it's a big job. Collect lessons learned, I put them together, I send them out to get more information from the project manager, the estimator that was there, and the job leader. Those are like the three key guys that were working on the project. And then I sent it out to upper management, and eventually what we would like to have happen with them is them put into a repository that's searchable, but also use the different communication methods that they talk about, push, pull, and interactive communication methods to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So we have a weekly email that goes out, like we have an internal website, internet, like this is what's on there this week. I'd like to do a monthly lessons learned email that goes out to everybody that has an email address. There's a specific spot on the internet where they can pull the information from if they want to look at it. And then we have not only bi-weekly project management meetings, we have bi-weekly estimator meetings, we have quarterly leader meetings that can all be put onto some of the presentation. So at least they've seen it at least once, hopefully more than once. And then if we can get a repository built for the project managers to review prior to what we call a handoff meeting, that's when everybody's in the same room. You've got the director of operations, chief estimator, regular estimator, project manager, field superintendent that works with field people, and the job leader. They're all in that room. If PM goes through the lessons learned before that meeting, they can talk about them and say, hey, you guys screwed the stud into the deflection track that crushed the wall. Don't do it again. Pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. We try to get a lot of pictures for it because then at least they're looking at it, they don't have to read it. Because people don't read. They don't. 50 words or less, they're not going to read it. If it's more than 50.
Markers, they're very visual.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even think about pictures. Yeah, that would be a lot more challenging for you.
We usually put a picture. Like, or, yeah. This product worked really well. You don't have to sit there and bend the track. You can it just snaps around. You can just bend it instead of having to screw it, cut it. Saves a lot of time. Well, here's the product out for that track.
Okay.
So that's our goal.
So
Your
for
goal as
media
well?
lessons learned, you have video, audio.
Actually, we do want to do some videos with
Yeah.
like best practices
Oh,
trainings.
definitely.
Because,
You can show what it looked like.
Right.
Get it wrong.
Right.
This is how you do it right.
and we've got a really pretty field guide we can put in.
What's interesting is, as you say that, this generation coming up through is the YouTube generation in
Yeah.
terms of, I learn everything on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we create that same culture with our lessons learned is, okay, I get to start with a project, I'm gonna learn as much as I can, so I don't look like an idiot down the road.
Right.
And that's how you get cross-functionally more experience. You mentioned being in a room together with everybody talking about it. I may pick up something that I don't use for a year or two, but I remember, hey, on that project, we've had this issue before. And just sharing those in that open environment through communication is huge. Because people aren't gonna actively go look for it unless they're interested, but if they're constantly hearing about it,
Yep.
it's worth something.
You have to search it the way that, like we're talking about categorization.
Yeah.
You have to have the queries
Yeah.
set up to where it will pull the kind of information. So if you're saying, screwing stuff into the wrong place, it may present 10 different options, and you try to look at those options. But again, all that stuff makes sense when it's, I like what you were saying, Megan. When you start a project, you get all the relevant people together, to say, okay, what do I need to look out for here? You know, what have you done? And be able to get some of that stuff. That's a way of taking everybody's repository they already carry with them and integrate with each other, but then to have that into something that's an actual system too. So it bounces all over the place. It's a matter of how you contain all that information. It's not going to be every single thing you ever learn probably, but the things that are relevant will just begin to grow. But as people use it, it'll just become automatic knowledge that they just go into it with. And that's when it's truly baked into your project. It's baked into the people on the team, on the people running the project, possibly vendors, all the way through. But it takes a while for some of this stuff to come along.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's, I mean, the whole point of lessons learned is you don't make the same mistakes over and over and expect a different result. Insanity. And
Part of the problem we're having is a lot of our guys are getting ready to retire. And when there's going to be a whole new generation of PMs, field guys, I mean, they're all, I can count probably 24 guys that are getting ready to retire in the next 5 years. Well, when they leave, they're taking 30 years worth of knowledge with them, and we don't have it written down. So we're going to get these new guys, and they're going to be making all sorts of mistakes, and that can cost money. You know, and not only but frustration. Who wants to be frustrated every day? Nobody. So we need to capture the knowledge now before they're all gone.
I think another way to do it too, do you have an operations manual you guys follow for your operations? Or, I mean, every project's going to be different.
In theory, yes.
That's good to know, because besides the job I do, I'm also involved with WMPMI, president currently, and I need to pass on what I know to the next president, to the other people that are here. And we established a position last year of somebody who was our process and procedures person. And that person got a job and moved on to another place and will take what he knows, but we have another process and procedures person. What I'm trying to do is take what I know about the organization and how it runs and get it into an operations manual. So when lessons learned do come along, if you look at the process and procedures manual, maybe we have to update this thing. Because that's where it starts to live of how it becomes operational. So project stuff that is working on the things we've never done before, or a variation of something we've done, and then we learn from that, and it becomes operational. Let's put it into there. So there's that constant updating of information. So when you're doing a particular kind of operation, you have, okay, this is what the operational manual says, and you get together with the people and say, is this still relevant? Okay, good. And it's already baked in not only to the manual, but also to the process you follow result of following those instructions. So for example, how to put on an event at the university club, how to do the lunch. That's something that we've documented. When do you start doing it? How do you get speakers? How do you document it? Is there contract information involved? As you know, when you have to notify these people, how do you order the menu? I mean, all those things are all things to do. And we know the best practices. How we even ended up here is the best practice because we were kind of all over the place with our fees in the past and how much they charged us and all these things. That's all accumulated knowledge that leads to where we're at right now. If everybody involved in this organization just left and said, hey, you're all the new board members, good luck, you know, how do you deal with that?
One.
Yeah. So that's what you're trying to avoid in your organization is having too much knowledge leave where you have to start over. And then how to document that. I love the idea of having pictures, video, sound, something like that.
Especially having it on the internet, that's always accessible.
Yeah, and having it, when you say accessible, having, like you said, on your phone.
Yeah.
You know, because, my kids, for God's sakes, I got a 24-inch Mac sitting in my house. They don't use it. They're sitting there on their phones doing their homework. I said, how? I said, how do you read your books? They take pictures of their books and they read it off of there. I said, how do you do that? I don't get it, but that's how they view the world is through their handheld device. And if they have to, they'll sit and moan about, I'm going to lose the Mac, and then they'll get on this great big screen that you can see words and everything on. And then they'll sit there typing like that instead of doing it like this. It's a different way of looking at the world, but that's how they do it. And that's what at least I have teenage daughters. So, yeah. So that's just how they do it. And once in a while they'll pick up a laptop and they'll type, but it's just, I'm just blown away by, I couldn't do that to myself. I'm on a book and I'm 50. You know?
Prepare for Alexa, tell me how to do this. That's my 11-year-old.
Alexa lessons learned, I like it.
Yeah.
So to your point, yeah. There's no good way, and I mean, yeah, there is going to be a generational turnover soon, which I kind of get grouped in that, but I like the books.
But that's why I mention it, because everything you put together today is going to be relevant 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Even if the knowledge is purely relevant, the access to it, or how it's categorized, how it's distributed, is that going to be relevant?
We have a lot of young people that give us ideas through Idea Program that we go through, and they're all about this needs to be online. You need to have this fillable online. Stop giving me paper. I don't want to have to go look for it. I want to send it in.
And then as soon as we put something online and make it only accessible online, then all our old timers go, where's my paper?
So maybe multiple formats.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what
And that's what we end up doing is
we just have there's so many guys and so many
Yeah.
age differences of, all
Well, I know what you mean by the paper, because I've had people, I've worked with another organization which they're in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to move them toward a website, and it's been just painful trying to get them. And then they want paper, they still send out postcards. And if I was to send something, if I was to say, Megan, why don't you join this organization, you'd probably see this thing come. Maybe if it makes it to you, if they have a post office at all, and it's like, oh, paper, yay, it's retro.
I'll probably lose this later.
But exactly, that this thing, all this knowledge doesn't make any difference if we don't have a way to distribute it to multiple audiences, and the way things are moving today, it's segmented. From here, like you said, it's a good joke, but it's true, that's why it's funny. Alexa, or Siri, tell me, what do I need to do a systems implementation project?
Yeah.
Make it short and sweet.
Yeah, so if we have any web developers in the room, this would be an incredible, is there an app for that? No, there's not. Or just something online, because that's the first thing we do when we have a problem, right? We look for a solution on Google. And then we look on the App Store and things like that. And it's there's nothing for lessons learned. And I was just blown away. So we're all going to rely.
yeah, right.
Just focus our attention in,
You could start your own company.
There you go. I'm giving you the idea.
Unless it is, sell it.
Yeah.
I think that was next. So I'm not an official project manager yet. I'm looking to become one in the future. I do web development. Started out as a web developer and became the team lead. And in that role, now I'm more of a business analyst, but in that role, basically all of the web developers do their own projects, and every project runs pretty similar each time. So even though one person is in charge of their own project, there are lessons that are learned that can apply to the whole team. So in the very beginning, when it was new, the department, we just did the projects, you did it on your own, and then someone else does their own project, makes the same mistakes, doesn't really learn anything. Whether that's code snippets with web development, people are rewriting the same things over and over and not really sharing knowledge. As I became kind of the Bob in the situation, where everyone always comes to me basically for those answers, and so I started writing them down in a shared folder. No one ever looks for it.
They still come up to you and ask? Yeah.
They still come up and ask, and they say, hey, I put a document in the shared folder, go read that, and then maybe they will, but next time they ask me the same thing again. As a team lead, what I would do is, whenever anybody had an issue with a project, like maybe a communication issue with a customer or some sort of hurdle, they would come to me about it and we talk about it, and I kind of keep a mental note of that and then use that to change processes. So implementing formal processes for things, we have brainstorming meetings about the issues that came up to then try and discover resolutions for them and implement it into a process. So there wasn't really a formal place that we stored that other than my brain, but I think the key is using it to translate it for action on next projects.
Is that
Yeah.
after each project or just?
Kind of just as it comes up. So a lot of projects might be run-of-the-mill, so nothing, I mean, they're all pretty similar. But if there is an issue that comes up, or recurring things like not being able to meet timelines because customers don't provide the content you need, or feedback was a recurring one. So that complaint came up all the time, and in reviewing like people's tickets and we had a ticketing system where they're required to document all the communication for the most part. And so if you look at that, it's like, hey, we were waiting for this customer for 6 months and they never got back to us. What can we do then to change our process to fix it? So not really anything formal, but having like the meetings,
There's
one-on-one
strategy, yeah.
meetings too, to say, hey, how are things going? What kind of issues are you running into? And use them to change process, so.
Dan?
So I work at Spectrum, and it's kind of too bad there's not more Spectrum people here, because I think it'd be really interesting to hear what each person had to say about lessons learned, because I have a feeling it'd be way different. So I'm in the EPMO there, so the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office, and so that's got so many project managers here. So that doesn't even take into consideration all the project managers or project specialists all throughout Spectrum. They're not all the project managers are in this EPMO. So there is not a place where anybody with a project in the title can put lessons learned. And in the EPMO, we're actually going through this redesign process right now, and I've asked, what are you going to do about lessons learned? And Dwayne's here too, so speak up if you know something more than I do. And it's like crickets. You know, I'm like, what are we going to do with this? Because we all do it. We have a template. We have a lessons learned template that we're supposed to use. We have standard documents. They're designed for all of us to use, at least in the EPMO. But that's about as far as it gets. Now, what some of us do are we have a site for your project where you house all your information for your project. We put it in there, but again, other people aren't going to know to go look for it there. What I personally do on the lessons learned is, so if I get a new project, and it is a lot of trying to find out, hey, have we done something like this? Who did it? You know, and we don't sit together. You were asking about that. I'm old. I don't have an office. So, I mean, we're not even together, but once in a while we get together, with your manager meeting or something like that. And you're asking, so have we done something before, or that kind of thing. But what I do is if I get a hold of somebody else's lessons learned or my own, if it's some similar project, when I kick off the next project, I actually attach the lessons learned
Nice,
to
okay.
the kickoff meeting. And so I don't necessarily always spend time to go through it, but I want it on the face of here's what happened. But, and then just real quick, because I know we're running out of time, I did all the integrations that Spectrum has done, and that's probably the only time I've seen lessons learned really work. Because we have a site for integrations, everybody knows where to go. It's probably the one time I've actually seen people actually use the information, learn from it, and improve what they did last time. And otherwise, I've not seen it too long.
Okay.
So I don't know, Dwayne, I'm not to jump over you, but if there's anything.
No, my thought going into all of this is, I'm gonna try to be brief. It's the Wild West, and it's just not searchable. If there is lessons learned conducted, ultimately, I was just thinking back to a previous life. I'd like to see it where it be a wiki, where everyone contributes. Some people do some QA, but again, no two projects are the same. So how you categorize it, how you make it searchable, I'm not sure. But even, I just put together a spreadsheet with 80 line items, how to make an SD card. I'd love to share that with the world. And the only reason why people have ever gotten a hold of me is because people heard word of mouth that I assembled a spreadsheet, so now you know what to order for an SD card. By the way, I'll share that spreadsheet with you. So media, pictures, video, spreadsheets, whatever to help get the job done. But also, like I said, I am accessible through all phases of the project.
Agreed? Yeah.
Quickly, we use SharePoint. We log our lessons learned by the project and then also by some key categories. But is it retrieved, used? It is searchable, but the keywords, the tags, probably not really well. From a gathering the information, we have new product development, phase reviews. I work in manufacturing. So we ask for lessons learned as we run through the project. We intentionally, in our last phase review lessons learned, and we periodically have what we call a new product development leadership team, and that would be where we would be asking members of a cross-functional team, was there anything going on with new product development this last quarter that we should focus as an opportunity for improvement? Or I just made a note, we probably should be talking about lessons learned from the last quarter. Put that as a standing agenda.
No.
So,
Ms. Sable? Anything?
Well, I'm not a project manager. I'm
Hey,
in sales for a IT staffing company. So with our company, from a corporate perspective, I'm not sure what they use for a lessons learned repository, but from a local perspective, I can share what we do as a sales organization. So we're, the way that we're set up is we're separated into divisionally aligned teams. And I think everybody knows Jill Earhart. She's one of our account managers at Tech Systems. I work with her. So she handles a lot of our applications business, and I handle a lot of our infrastructure business. So we both have teams that we meet with on a quarterly basis. So we'll set up at the beginning of the quarter what we call our expected business results, whether that's going to be how many people we're going to put to work, or if we're targeting a specific account, how many job requisitions we want to get, and track how many we fill and how many finish, those types of things. And then we'll do that on a quarterly basis. And we use Salesforce, and if there's a specific account that we're targeting, like an enterprise level account, we have bi-monthly meetings. What managers we're targeting we get in front of, and what happened with those meetings. So it's all within Salesforce and very searchable.
Okay.
So there's a ton of dashboards within Salesforce that we use. So from that perspective, I don't know how applicable that is to your conversation, but
Okay.
that's how we track it. And
It's efficient for you?
it's
It
worked
works?
very
Okay.
well for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything? Anyone else have anything else to add? And we are at the top of, we are over. So that, I guess, is it for today. This was going to be kind of a breakfast meeting, but we actually implemented it into a lunch meeting, so that way we can get more people. So maybe moving forward, we can kind of take a few months, go back to our industries, figure out some things. And then I'm actually, if you did put your email on that survey, I'm going to send out a kind of like a percentage of each as well. And then maybe try to do some sort of a graph or something like that about it. But maybe we can continue to have these, like almost a quarterly, of lessons learned repositories, and we can be the ones to figure this out. The Western Michigan PMI. But I appreciate your time, and thank you all for coming to my first speaking opportunity with Western Michigan. So.
Thank you.